Hello, my name is Gary Robertson. I'm here to talk to you about smoking. One thing I want to confess in the first place is that I'm an ex-smoker. I think that's important because most people that smoke or don't smoke don't understand smoking at all. Um, if you ask most people why does anyone smoke, they're going to be pretty clueless. They may come up with, one theory or another that they've heard, but for the most part, they really don't understand it at all. And neither do smokers. I think the only people more clueless about why people smoke is smokers themselves. If you ask them why, they're going to come up with a lot of pretty silly and pretty non-convincing statements about why they smoke. Most people, they talk about when they started smoking, what was the story behind it. Most of the stories are pretty silly. Along those lines, why I started smoking was I really don't have a good explanation for myself, except that I was around smoking a lot. I started smoking in probably about 1964-65, and that was after my dad had smoked for the first 18 years of my life in the house, in the cars, wherever we were. It was a big social thing for people to be smoking, to pass cigarettes around as a gesture of friendship and so on, like you see in the movies. It was pretty much old school kind of stuff. My dad never did quit smoking. One of the reasons that I came up with this smoking program is because he suffered so much from smoking, and I thought, I've learned a lot about it. I quit myself. I have part of my definition of being an ex-smoker is that I quit around 1980-81, and I have not wanted a cigarette since then. I have never been tempted by smoking. I don't like being around other people's cigarette smoke, so I can say that I am totally cured of smoking, and that's part of the perspective that I'm bringing to this program. I'm going to give you a few tips about smoking that hopefully will help you. The first one is along the lines of what we've already been talking about. People do not understand smoking. And when I taught some psychology classes back in the early 1970s, one of the things that we were doing with some of the concepts that we were using is problem solving. And I came up with a little chart, and one of the things that I said on that is that the first thing we need to do in order to solve a problem is to understand it. If we don't understand a problem, it's really difficult to resolve. And I think smoking is a real good example of one that is very difficult for people to quit because we don't understand it. The statement that I came up with is that if an adequate definition of a problem contains the solution. Okay, we say it once more time. An adequate definition of a problem contains the solution within the description. If it doesn't contain the description or the solution in the description, then go back to the drawing board and try again, because you need to really understand a problem in order to come up with a good solution. So that's my first tip, is that you really need to understand smoking itself, what it does for you, in general. Why people smoke is, like I said, is very often different than why they say they smoke. We'll get into a little more about that. The second tip that I have is that one of the reasons that it's so difficult to quit smoking is because it's not a single addiction like a lot of the other things are. It's multi-layered, and each one of the layers is not really difficult. We talk about the habit of smoking. Okay, so there's the habitual part of it. There's social aspects to it. There's also physiological aspects. Um, and most of the programs out there are not very successful because they only deal with one of the layers or one of the aspects of smoking. And you really need to get most of them in order to be able to quit easily and effortlessly, which is what my goal is with this program, is to offer something that really works pretty much if people use it 100% of the time. The third tip is that part of a definition, an adequate definition of any kind of addiction, is that very simply is an addiction is a substitution of a substance for something else. So in the case of smoking, there's several different aspects of it. There's substitutes for something else. And if you get the something else, then why would you want the substitute? You know, women will argue with this, of course, but one definition, for instance, of chocolate addiction is that it's a substitute for love. And most women, I remember one woman talking about having a relationship with chocolate, and why men don't understand that. And that's true. I don't. I'm just throwing that in as one example, but what you get out of smoking is a substitute for something else. Understanding what it's a substitute for is an important part of the definition of why you smoke or any other person smokes. The fourth tip that I have is that everyone has a different version of smoking addiction. If you come up with a single definition for it, like Freud tried to do, saying, well, it's just a substitute for oral gratification. It didn't work. I mean, you could go around, you could tell people that all day long, and nobody quit smoking because it was a gratification, it was oral gratification. It just didn't help. It was not a very helpful definition, is what I'm saying. People need to really understand not only the general parts of the addiction, but their particular versions of it. If you look at anyone's pattern for smoking, the example guy gave me is that he had a lot of problems with handling customers in his business. He was much more comfortable in the back shop. When he got called up to deal with some irate customer or some dissatisfied customer, he said in the back of his mind all the time, he's thinking, okay, when I get done having to deal with this person, I can go out back and have a smoke and relax. So that was part of his reason for continuing to smoke, and it had a whole lot to do with why he never got into a program, as far as I know, and quit. The fifth tip that I have is about the myth. There's a big myth about smoking that it's relaxing. That is certainly not true. With the chemistry of smoking, the primary chemical in any kind of tobacco addiction is nicotine. Nicotine is a stimulant, and it's a very, very powerful, very toxic chemical. One of the stories that I remember reading from back in the 1950s was someone working in one of the tobacco research places, fairly low-level kind of guy apparently. He spilled pure nicotine on his coveralls, and within a couple of minutes he went into cardiac arrest and was taken to the hospital. He did survive, fortunately for him. But he was off work for probably weeks, I think, And when he finally came back to work, and finally totally recovered, he went back to work, put on the same pair of coveralls, and within a couple of minutes, when he got moist enough, his skin got moist enough to start absorbing the nicotine again, he went into cardiac arrest again. So dried nicotine on coveralls can kill someone. It's that potent a chemical. You don't have to go that far with it. Anytime you want to test out my statement that it's a myth that inhaling nicotine is relaxing, just take your heart rate. Check it out. Light up. Smoke a cigarette fast. You know, get as much nicotine as you can handle, and in a short amount of time. Check your heart rate again. If you're still not convinced, chain smoke. Take another one, or borrow an unfiltered cigarette from someone, and try that. So get a higher dose. You'll notice that your heart rate goes way up, which is, I said I was going to give you 5 tips. I'll give you 6. Okay. Number 6 is that there's a benefit to smoking, and that's what most people do not factor in when they talk about quitting. They say, "Oh, it's just a bad habit." Well, no, it's not. There are benefits for smoking, because people who smoke can regulate their energy levels in ways that non-smokers cannot do. It's just, if you really look at what smoking does for people individually, it's kind of my pet theory that smokers tend to be those who want to operate at a higher energy level than the average person, or at least as higher level than they can do on their own. So in a sense, it operates as false energy, false will. If you're, instead of being interested in something, you can have a cigarette. The final image I want to leave with you is, I think, one of the truths about that particular aspect of smoking was in a big poster for, I think it was Camel cigarettes, of a woman during World War II who was at a USO dance, and the caption, supposedly in her voice, was that she was there helping to serve her country by dancing with the military personnel at the USO. And so when she got tired, she could go out and take a cigarette break and get her energy back, and then she could go in and dance some more. So that's one of the things that smoking allows people to do, is if it's dancing, you can go dance some more when you're tired. So it is a very powerful stimulant. You need to factor that in, because that's going to have a lot to do with why it's difficult to quit. So that's my 6 tips about to understand smoking a little better. I hope that helps. I'm going to be posting a link on this so that you can also take a closer look at the program I put together called the SmoQuitz System. And there's a website. There's a lot more information on there, and there's also links there if you would like to try the program to go ahead and get it. So I hope that helps, and have a good day.